I will now be attempting to, in one TikTok, explain to you from memory the entire plot of the ABC hit show Lost. Oceanic 815 crashes into a weird island. We meet the main character, Jack. He's a doctor. He then meets another main character, Kate. She ruins everything. Jack, like every other character on the show, is deeply flawed, and we learn about his background through flashbacks. Turns out he was sort of an alcoholic. His father was also an alcoholic. He also was transporting his dead father's body on the plane that just crashed. That would be fine if it wasn't for the fact that he then saw his dead father's body walking around on the island. Also, there's a monster on the island and it makes weird noises. No one knows what the monster looks like, but it makes the trees rattle and it goes woo! Okay, so there's also a mysterious bald guy who has a lot of knives. His name is John Locke and he's the best character. Second best character. Third best character. Okay. Gotta speed things up here. I'm gonna skip some stuff, so bear with me. Shit goes down on the island. One of the people who we thought was a passenger on the plane was actually a native of the island or something and was kidnapping people, and that's not okay. So there appears to be another faction of people on this island. There also is some kind of weird otherworldly whispers going on that may or may not be associated with the other faction. Okay, so they're losing hope about being rescued and they ultimately go inland into the island. They find fresh water and there's a whole bunch of stuff around that. Here's where shit blows up. John Locke, the mysterious bald-headed guy, he discovers a hatch in the ground, like a metal structure, and he spends basically an entire season excavating it. Ultimately, they blow open the hatch using dynamite that they found on a shipwrecked slaver ship that for some reason is in the middle of the island. Anyway, there's a person living in this hatch. His name is Desmond, and he's the second best character. Fourth best character. Desmond has been inside of this hatch for several years. He presses a button every 108 minutes, or otherwise apparently the world will end. We don't know what will happen if the button is not pressed, but all of this was set up by some group called the Dharma Initiative back in the 70s. There's a rift. Some people think the button is real, some people think the button is not. Ultimately, they try to see what happens when the button is not pressed, and oops, it's bad. During this time, we also learn more about the others, the other faction on the island. They send one person over who represents them. Also, a kid got kidnapped in the first season. I kind of skipped that for time purposes. So the others, they're led by a character named Benjamin Linus, second best character in the show. And Ben is like really smart and has everything together. He's always a step ahead of everyone else. He's kind of like the puppet master controlling everything. Good God, I'm running out of time already. Okay, skipping over a lot more stuff. Oh, I want to make it very, very clear, interjecting real quick. All of this actually happened. They were not dead the whole time. Okay, skipping forward a little bit, Ben gets captured. He's held in the hatch. That's not kind of good for him, but it's actually kind of good for him. And he ends up getting one of the main characters to kill some of the other main characters, but that was actually just because the actors got a DUI and they had to get rid of them on the show. Okay, also, it turns out that a big portion of the tail section of the plane had people who also survived, so we learned about their backstory. They introduced a bunch of characters from there, but they basically kill all of them off, including Mr. Echo, the first best character in the show. I need to go faster. It turns out that Desmond has a love interest who's rich and well-connected, and she's been searching for him. She makes contact with him, and she's sending what seems to be a freighter full of people who want to try to save them. Turns out that's not actually her freighter, it's somebody else's freighter. It's full of military people, and they're going to try to kill Ben. The freighter actually belongs to Desmond's girlfriend's father, who actually was the former leader of the others before Ben. Ben ousted him. So Ben wants to kill him, he wants to kill Ben, it's a whole mess, and in the process, some of the people who are survivors on the island get off. They're called the Oceanic Six, and there's still other people alive on the island, but they don't talk about it. Ultimately, the show starts doing flash forwards, where we see their future from the island instead of just their past. And it turns out that the main character, Jack, wants to get back onto the island because he's basically lost purpose in life. A bunch of shit happens when they get back to the island. It turns out that the big boys were not actually Ben and the other dude. It turns out the big boys were actually Jacob and the Man in Black. Jacob is effectively God, and the Man in Black, whoops, he's the monster that goes woo! And they're brothers also. So basically those two represent pure forces of good and evil, and also there's a temple on the island, and they're kind of deities, but also not. Oh wait, also, okay, so John Locke gets off the island and he has to go by a different name because people will know who he is. He's trying to convince everybody to get back to the island. He's the reason they all went back. Also, he dies because Ben kills him. He's a literal Jesus metaphor. Okay, so they actually end up going back in time by accident because Ben has to ultimately move the island to save it from the guy who's trying to invade. And he moves the island using some sort of like ancient apparatus that does some sort of mystical shit, but it gets stuck and it actually moves the island through space and time. So we spend an entire season sort of flashing through time until we ultimately have some of the people ending up in like the 1970s. And guess what? They joined the Dharma Initiative, the group that built the hatch in the first place. And guess what? They caused the incident that makes it so they have to press the button every 108 minutes. So they literally set off a nuclear bomb. That's the thing that causes them to have to press a button every 108 minutes. That also starts a whole new phenomenon, the flash sideways. We had flashbacks, flash forwards, now it's flash sideways. This is where people get confused and think they were dead the whole time. Everything that happened, but the flash sideways is purgatory. It represents a space that all of them built together and they all need to come together to move on into the afterlife. So in the flash sideways, which is like a parallel world, they're all trying to find each other and convince each other that they need to move on. And one by one, they realize what's going on and they gather in a church and they move on to the afterlife. Ultimately, one of the main characters who's a fan favorite that I didn't mention becomes the new god of the island, and he enlists Ben to be his number 2. Ben kind of has a redemption arc, sort of. I skipped so much stuff, like so much stuff. People who are mad about the ending didn't understand it. It's actually a great ending. And also, I'm going to do a longer video on this on my YouTube at some point because it's pretty fun to ramble about. Okay, bye.